9 years, and the girl who opens the door is 8 years old. She asks the man on the step if he is the plumber. Marisa Guarino does not turn around. She keeps stirring the sauce. She has known that voice since she was 19. What she does not know is why he is here at 7 in the morning and why she has not told her daughter to shut the door. The gravy had been on since 5. The rule in the apartment over spare duties was a rule about heat, not about cooking. By 9 in the morning at the end of August, the kitchen would be over 100 degrees, and nobody with any sense would stand beside a pot after that. So Marisa got up at 10 to 5, put the pot on the back burner, and by the time the church bells at St. Anne rang 7, she had 6 hours of work behind her and had not yet been to work. She heard the knock. She heard Julia's feet come down the hall at a run, because at 8 years old, every knock in the world might be something good. Ma, there's a man. Ask who it is. I asked. He didn't say. Marisa put the spoon down on the saucer she kept beside the burner. She turned the flame off. She had known who it was from the second knock, because the second knock came at exactly the same height and weight as the first, and there was only one person she had ever met who knocked on a door like a man counting something. She had learned a long time ago to say the number by itself, without the rest of the sentence attached to it. 9 years in the state prison at Cranston, and a bus that got in on Friday. 9 years ago, in this same kitchen, that knock had meant he had come up the back stairs with bread from Sciallo's under his arm and no intention of leaving before midnight. Her mother had been alive then, and her mother had liked him, which had made everything worse later. Marisa had been 24, and she had thought that a man who knocked carefully was a man who would always be careful with her. She walked down the hall. Julia had the door open all the way, standing on the sill in her socks, and she had one hand on the frame like a little cop. Nicolo Ferraro filled the stairwell. It was the first thing she saw and the last thing she wanted to see. 9 years had not taken anything off him. They had packed more on, through the shoulders and the back and the neck, so that the collar of his shirt sat tight against his throat, and the buttons pulled a little when he breathed. He still had his mother's face under it, the heavy brow, the straight nose, a mouth that had never once needed to smile to get anything out of anybody, and the years had only cut all of it deeper. He was holding a paper bag with the top rolled down, and his hand closed around it and the bag disappeared. "Hi," he said. "Are you the plumber?" Julia asked him. "Because the sink downstairs makes a noise." He looked at the girl for a long time. Long enough that Marisa had to hold on to the wall. "No," he said. "I'm not the plumber." "Okay," said Julia, and she waited. And when nothing else came, she said, "Do you want to come in? We have gravy." "Ju, go get dressed." "But go get dressed." The girl went. She went slowly, the way children go when they know they are being sent out of a room and not to a room, and she looked back twice. Then it was the two of them in the hallway, with 11 feet of linoleum between them, and Marisa understood that she was going to have to speak first, and that she had been going to have to speak first for 9 years. "You got out Friday," she said. "I heard Friday." "Friday. So you took 3 days." "I had to report first. Then I had to find an address." He shifted the bag to his other hand. "They don't let you out into nothing. You have to name a place you'll be sleeping, and somebody has to sign that you know they're sleeping there. And you named this one." "I named the apartment downstairs. Nuncia told my parole officer it's been empty since April." He said it flat, without asking for anything, which was the only way he had ever asked for anything. "It has been empty since April." Marisa looked past his shoulder at the stairs going down, at the brown door on the first landing with the deadbolt she had never replaced, and she thought about the $300 a month that door had not been paying her since the Ruiz family moved to Warwick. She thought about the walk-in cooler at the restaurant that had quit on Tuesday, and the school supply list taped to the refrigerator with a highlighted line that said, "Scientific Calculator." Men at the counter still went quiet when she laughed, and she had stopped noticing it years ago, somewhere between the third double shift and the first parent-teacher conference she went to alone. He noticed. He was taking all of it in from the far end of the hall and pretending not to. The thick, dark hair pushed up under a folded cloth, the round of her cheek and the set of her mouth, the arms that carried a 20-quart pot up a flight of stairs twice a day, the color the stove had been putting in her face since 5 in the morning. She could feel him not looking at her, on purpose, the same way a man does not look at a burn. "You could have called," she said. "They record the calls." "For 9 years?" "For 9 years. That's not why." "No," he said, "that's not why." Somewhere below them, a car went past with the windows down and the radio going, and the heat came up the stairwell behind him and got into the hall, and Marisa was suddenly aware of the sweat at the back of her neck, and the flour on her forearms, and the fact that she was standing in her own house arguing about a telephone. "She knows who you are," she said, "in case that's the thing you came up here to find out. I never lied to her. Not one time. She's known since she could ask, and she's asked plenty." Something happened in his face then. It was not relief. Marisa had expected relief, and had been ready to hate him for it. "What does she call me?" he said. "Nico." He nodded slowly, twice. "Okay. She'll keep calling you that." "Okay. I mean, she'll keep calling you that, Nicolo. That's not a thing that changes because you paid a lease." "I heard you," he said. "The first time." She held out her hand for the papers. He had to take them out of the bag, and while he did, she saw the rest of what was in there. A plastic wallet with a state seal on it, a folded shirt, a paperback with the cover gone. 9 years of a man's life going up a set of stairs in a sack from the property room. The form wanted a name, an address, a relationship to the offender, and a signature. There was no box on it for what she was to him. She stood there holding a pen over a line and could not make the pen come down, and the pot behind her ticked as it cooled, and down the hall her daughter was singing something with the words wrong. "Marisa, don't. I'm not going to come upstairs," he said. "You'll never open a door and find me on the other side of it. I'll pay the $300 on the first, and if you want me out on the second, I'll go, and I won't ask you where I'm supposed to go instead." "Where are you supposed to go instead?" He did not answer. That was an answer. She signed. Her hand knew how to sign, at least. Her hand had been signing forms alone since before the girl could hold a pencil. She put the pen down on top of the paper and looked at the wall over his shoulder and said the only thing she had left. "Downstairs is downstairs." "Downstairs is downstairs," he agreed. He went. She listened to him go, the whole way, 12 steps and the turn and 8 more, and she listened to the brown door open on a hinge she had been meaning to oil since April. Then she went back into the kitchen and stood in front of the stove and did not turn the flame on. Julia came in with her shirt on backwards and a hair tie in her teeth, and asked, around the hair tie, the question that Marisa was going to be answering for the rest of the month. "Is he going to eat with us?" He woke at 5 without an alarm, because 9 years is long enough to teach a body anything, and he lay in the dark of a strange apartment, listening to a ceiling. The ceiling was the part he had not thought about. Down here, he could hear everything that happened up there. A chair being pushed back, water running, 2 sets of feet, one heavy and slow, and one that never walked when it could run. At 6:20, the small feet went across the kitchen 11 times in a row for no reason he could work out, and he lay on a bare mattress in a room with his bags still packed and listened to his daughter cross a floor. He had a rule for himself, and he had made it on the bus from Cranston. The rule was that he did not get to want anything. He had used up the part of his life where he was allowed to want things. He had used it up on purpose and with his eyes open. And a man who spends a thing cannot stand around afterward complaining that he does not have it. So at 7, he went out and looked at the building instead. The building was in trouble. He could see it from the sidewalk in about 90 seconds. The gutter over the second floor was pulling away at the bracket. There was rot in the sill of the front bay, and the window unit hanging out of the kitchen on the second floor was dead. He knew it was dead because it was the last week of August in Providence. The air had not moved since Thursday, and the unit was not running. Nunzia Ferrante came out onto the third-floor porch above him in a housecoat and looked down. "Nicolo Ferraro," she said, like she was reading it off a wall. "Mrs. Ferrante. You got fat. I got older." "You got fat," she said, satisfied, and went back inside, which was the entire welcome he received from Federal Hill after 9 years. The compressor was seized. He got it down off the sill by himself around 10, walking it out and taking the whole weight of it against his chest, and it came down the stairs a step at a time, with the metal edge biting his forearms. He set it on the sidewalk in the sun and stood there breathing. By then, it was 94 degrees. He took off his shirt because the shirt was soaked through, and because there was no one on Atwell's at that hour, except an old man hosing a step, and he laid it over the railing and went to work with a screwdriver on the housing. The ink covered both forearms and the backs of both hands, black and gray, no color anywhere, worked so close in places that from 3 feet away his arms looked shaded rather than drawn on. It climbed the left side of his neck and stopped at the jaw. He had gone in with half of it. He had come out with all of it, because time is the one thing that place gives you for free. The kitchen window on the second floor was up, and it had been up since he took the unit out, because the thing that used to fill it was lying on the sidewalk in pieces at his feet. He did not look up at it. He worked the screwdriver, and he did not look up, and he knew the whole time exactly where she was standing. For 9 years, every time she had laid eyes on him, it had been through something. The window of a sheriff's van on Dorrance Street, a photograph in a court file, 4 column inches in the journal. Now there was nothing between them but 20 feet of August, and a man who has been looked at through glass that long knows the difference in his skin. He kept his head down and let her have it for free. "What's that one?" Julia was sitting on the concrete step with her chin on her knees. He had not heard her come out. "Which one?" "The one on your hand." "An anchor." "Were you in the Navy?" "No." "Then why is it an anchor?" He turned the screwdriver twice before he answered. "Because a friend of mine could only do an anchor." She thought about that and found it acceptable. She came down 1 step. "Can I help?" "You can hold the cup." "Are you a bad man?" The screwdriver stopped for about a second and then went on. "Some people would say so." "I'm not asking some people." "Then no, I don't think so anymore." "Did you used to be?" "For a while I was." "Ma says you did something bad one time and you paid for it and you don't do it anymore." "Your mother tells you the truth." "I know. It's annoying." He gave her a plastic cup. Every screw he took out went into it, and she counted them out loud as they went in. By 11, she had counted to 22 and told him 3 separate facts about her class. That Mr. Devane was the only teacher who let you eat in the room, that a girl named Aaliyah had a dog with 2 different eyes, and that her mother could pick a meatball out of hot oil with her fingers and not even care. "She can't feel it," Julia said. "Her hands are broken from work. But she has to use her wrist for my bath because she can't tell if it's too hot. That's why she uses her wrist." Nico kept his head down over the housing. "Is that true?" he said. "Yeah, try it. Touch the metal." He touched the metal. It had been in the sun for an hour, and it took the skin off the pad of his thumb. He set his hand back down flat on it, left it there a second longer than he needed to, then went back to the screws. At 11:30, the fan blade came loose out of the housing at an angle he had not planned for, and opened the inside of his left forearm from the wrist up about 3 inches. It was not deep. He had seen worse from a plastic tray, but it bled hard and at once, all over the sidewalk and the housing and the plastic cup. Julia stood up and yelled for her mother in a voice that could be heard in Cranston. Marisa came down with a dish towel already in her hand. She did not say anything. She took his wrist, turned the arm over toward the light, looked at it for 2 seconds and said, "Upstairs. The sink down there has no pressure. I'll do it out here. You'll do it in my kitchen, and then you'll go back down. Ju, get the box from over the fridge." So he went up the stairs he had promised not to go up on the 3rd day over a fan blade. The kitchen was smaller than he remembered, and it smelled like the inside of his own head, tomato and garlic and the hot metal smell of a stove that had been running since 5 in the morning. There was a jar of wooden spoons by the burner. There was a school supply list on the refrigerator with one line highlighted yellow. There was a saucer beside the back burner with a spoon on it, and the spoon had a dry line of gravy on the handle where a thumb had held it. She ran the water cold and put his arm under it and held it there by the wrist, and neither of them said anything for a while. Her hands were exactly what her daughter had said they were. The pads of her fingers were smooth and hard, half a shade lighter than the rest of her, and there were 3 old burn marks in a row across the back of the right one where a pan had come out of the oven wrong at some point in the last 9 years, and he had not been there. "You're going to want a butterfly on the top of it," she said. "A bandage will open the second you use the arm." "Okay. You're going to use the arm anyway." "Yes. Hold this." She dried the arm. She got the little adhesive strips out of the box and put them on one at a time, pulling the edges of the cut closed with her thumb and forefinger, working from the top down, and her thumb stayed flat on his palm to hold his hand steady while she did it. It stayed there after she had finished the last strip. Neither of them moved. Out the window, a bus took the corner at Atwell's and hissed. Upstairs, Nuncia's television was going. Julia was in the hall with the first aid box against her chest, watching 2 adults stand still in a kitchen and not understanding what she was looking at, which was fine, because neither of them was going to explain it to her. Marisa let go and stepped back and turned the tap off with more force than the tap required. "It's clean," she said. "Keep it out of the dirt." "Thank you." "Go downstairs, Nicolo." He went to the door. Then he did the thing he had told himself on the bus he was not going to do, which was to ask for something. "Jew," he said, "what do you like to eat?" His daughter looked up from the first aid box. "Rice balls," she said. "But the real ones, not the freezer ones. The ones with the peas inside. You have to fry them, and Ma says they take all day, so we only get them at Christmas." Behind him, at the sink, the water came on again very suddenly and very loud. He did not turn around because he was the one who had taught her mother to make them, on a night in February, in that kitchen. He went downstairs and sat on the edge of a bare mattress with what was left of his gate money counted out on the windowsill, working out what 2 days of rice and a pound of meat would cost, and whether a man who had promised never to come up was allowed to send something up instead. Sperduties opened at 11 and the knives were sharpened at 10:40. That was hers. Old man Sperduti had been dead 6 years, and his nephew ran the place from a phone in Cranston. So the only thing at 219 Atwell's that still happened on a schedule was Marisa Guarino putting a blade against a steel and drawing it down 12 times on each side. 12 and 12. Her mother had taught her the count, and her mother had been taught by a man who cut meat, and the reason for the count was that a dull knife is the one that opens your hand. A sharp blade goes where you send it. A dull one skates off an onion skin and finds you. The regulars knew the sound. When it stopped, the door was unlocked. She worked the flat top and the fryer and the window, all 3, because the nephew had cut the second cook in March. It meant she cooked backwards all day. The order came up on a hook in time order, not table order, and she read 6 tickets at once and worked out which thing took longest and put that down first, then the next, so that 6 plates that had never met each other arrived at the pass in the same 45 seconds. 30 seconds of arithmetic wrong and the whole run died on the shelf. She could do that with 6 plates. She had never once been able to do it with her own life. By 11:20, the counter was full. Frankie the mailman, 2 guys from the paving crew, a woman from the salon with her phone flat on the formica. The fan over the door pushed hot air around and did not cool anything. She had bread from yesterday going into a pan with oil and garlic, because yesterday's bread holds its shape in liquid, and today's bread turns to paste, and every good thing this neighborhood had ever eaten came out of that fact. At 11:30, a man sat down at the end stool with his back to the wall. She knew before she looked up. There is a way the room changes. Marisa? Mr. Mancuso? Ettore Mancuso was 44 and dressed like a man who owned 2 dry cleaners, which he did. He put his hat on the stool beside him, which nobody had done at that counter since 2004, and he read the board on the wall for a while, as though he had not already decided. "The escarole soup," he said, "and a coffee. How is the girl?" "She's fine. She's in 3rd grade now." "Yes." "Bishop McVinney or the public one?" Marisa set the cup down in front of him without any coffee in it, then filled it, because her hands had decided on their own to do the 2 things separately. "The public one," she said. "Good building. Bad boiler." He tasted the coffee. 9 years, Marisa. 9 years and 1 month, if we are being exact, and I have never once come in here and asked you a question you did not want to answer. You will grant me that. I'll grant you that. So I am not going to start. He said it kindly. He was always kind. That had always been the trouble with him, and she had understood it since she was 24 years old and standing in the back of a courtroom. Ettore Mancuso never threatened anybody in his life. He simply arrived and was pleasant and left something behind, and the thing he left behind always turned out to have a number on it. She brought his soup. He ate about 1/3 of it and set the spoon down. "He is in the building," he said. "He's in the apartment downstairs. He pays rent. It's a lease." "I know it is a lease. I read it." He wiped his mouth. "Marisa, I want to say a thing to you plainly, out of respect, because you are a person who works, and I have always liked people who work. What that man did 9 years ago, he did on his own. Nobody sent him. Nobody thanked him afterward either. And that is the part that people forget. In our world, a man who takes another man's weight and then comes home and says nothing about it is owed something. Everybody agrees. Everybody has agreed for 9 years. Then pay him and leave him alone. That is what I would like to do." He turned his cup a quarter turn on the saucer. But he came back to a street where he is still on a page. His name was never crossed out, you understand. For 9 years, there has been a line in a book with Nicolo Ferraro written on it, and a number next to that line. And every month, somebody has had to do something about that number. That is not a debt he can decline. It is bookkeeping. He isn't going back to any of it. He may not have a choice about going back. He has a choice about what he goes back as. Ettore smiled at her, and it was a real smile, warm, the smile of a man at a christening. "You know what I think? I think it would be a great shame if the only thing he came home for was a room." 9 years ago, in the back of a courtroom on Dorrance Street, she had turned around because somebody touched her elbow, and it had been this same man, with this same face, saying that she should sit down, that she looked pale, that a girl in her condition should not stand for 2 hours. He had known before her mother knew. She had never told him. She had never worked out how he knew, and after a while she had stopped trying, which was the first thing in her life she ever gave up on. He finished the coffee. He put down a 20 for a soup and a coffee that came to $6.40, and then he took out 3 more hundreds and laid them flat under the edge of the saucer, squared up, the way you leave money you intend somebody to count. "For the girls' school things," he said. "The list is long this year. My sister has one the same age. $300. To the dollar, it was the rent on the downstairs apartment. I can't take that. It is already on the counter." He stood and put on his hat. "Tell him I said welcome home. Tell him I will come to him, so he does not have to come to me. That is a courtesy, and he will know it is a courtesy." He left. The paving guys started talking again about 2 seconds after the door shut, and Frankie asked for more bread, and Marisa stood at the pass with a ticket in her hand and read the same 6 words on it 4 times. Then she picked up the $300 and put it in the register, rang "No sale," and wrote a slip. Held, E.M., August 26th. She was not going to spend it, and she was not going to be able to give it back, and the slip was the only thing in the world she could do to it. She walked home at 4 with the sun still full on the west side of Atwell's. He was on the sidewalk in front of the building with the guts of the window unit laid out on a piece of cardboard in some order she could not read. He had a new compressor beside him, secondhand, and $11 of copper fittings, and her daughter's chalk drawing of a horse was 2 feet from his knee, and he had worked around it instead of over it. Ettore Mancuso came to the counter today, she said. He did not look up right away. When he did, his face had gone somewhere else, somewhere she had seen exactly twice before, and both times something had happened afterward. What did he order? Nico said. What does that matter? It matters. Escarole soup and a coffee. He left $300 on the counter and told me to tell you, welcome home. She heard her own voice going flat and could not stop it. He said he'll come to you, so you don't have to go to him. He said that's a courtesy. Nico put the screwdriver down on the cardboard, carefully, in a specific place, as though where it went mattered. Okay, he said. Don't say okay to me, Marisa. No, here's what happens now. She stood at the bottom of the stairs with her bag still on her shoulder, because if she put the bag down, she would be a person having a conversation, and she was not going to be that. You don't come up. Not for a cut arm, not for a leaky sink, not for anything. If she wants to see you, she sees you out here, on the step, where the whole street can watch, and you bring her back up to the landing, and you stop at the landing. You want to eat, you eat downstairs. All right, I'm not finished. If a man like that ever walks into my restaurant again on account of you, you're out on the 2nd of the month, and I'll sign whatever they want me to sign to make it happen. All right, he said again, and that was worse than an argument. She got 4 steps up before he spoke. Marisa, which school did he ask about? She stopped with her hand on the rail. She had not told him that Ettore had asked about a school. She went back over the whole conversation on the sidewalk in her head, twice, fast, and she had not said it. How did you know he asked about a school? She said. Because that's the only thing he came in there for, said Nico. The soup was so he could sit down. He kept the rule for 4 days, and keeping it was easier than he had expected, because there was a great deal of work on the outside of a building. He put the new compressor in on Thursday and had cold air coming out of that kitchen by 2 in the afternoon, and he knew the exact minute it started working, because 11 feet above his head, somebody said a word he had taught her mother not to say in front of children. He rehung the gutter. He took the rot out of the bay sill and cut a piece of cedar to fill it, and did not paint it, because paint was $4, and he had 11. Nobody paid him for any of it. Nobody mentioned it either. Twice he came out in the morning and there was a coffee sitting on the step, gone cold, left by a person who had not wanted to be there when he found it. On the Saturday, the small feet stopped over his head, and then somebody knocked on the floor 3 times, deliberately, like a person who has worked out that a floor is also a door. Nico. He looked up at the ceiling. Yeah? What are you doing down there? It smells like Sunday. Cooking. Cooking what? Something that takes 2 days. Nothing takes 2 days. This does. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. A pause. Is it for us? He stood in a rented kitchen with a wooden spoon in his hand and did not answer, because the answer was yes, and a man who had promised to stay downstairs was not entitled to say it out loud. Nico, go do your homework. It's summer. Then go do somebody else's. That doesn't even mean anything, said the ceiling, with enormous satisfaction, and the feet went away at a run, and through the boards he heard her tell her mother, at the volume of an 8-year-old who believes she is whispering, that the man downstairs was making something that took 2 whole days. On Sunday he made the rice balls. They take 2 days if you do them properly, and he had 2 days. The rice has to be cooked in stock on Saturday and spread on a sheet pan and left overnight, because warm rice will not hold a shape and cold rice will. The filling is ragu, cooked down until it is nearly dry, with peas folded in at the very end so they stay green. Then you take a handful of cold rice, Open it in your palm, put the filling in the middle, and close your hand. And the closing is the whole job. Everybody can make the rice. It is the closing of the hand that people get wrong. He had learned it at 15, from a woman on Night Street who paid him in food, and he had taught it to a girl of 24 in a kitchen upstairs, on a night in February when they were supposed to be doing something else. Nuncia Ferrante watched the whole Saturday operation from the third-floor porch with her arms folded on the railing. That is a lot of rice for one man. It isn't for one man. I know who it is for. She let that sit exactly as long as she wanted it to sit. Your mother put the peas in at the end too. Everybody else puts them in with the meat, and everybody else is wrong. I know. So you had a teacher, and you had a mother, and look at you. She straightened up off the railing. More salt in the water, Nicolo. You never put enough salt in the water. There's salt in it. There is salt in it, the way there is money in my purse. She leaned further out over the railing. Who taught you to be careful? Your mother was not careful. Your mother put a fistful in, and it came out right every single time. My mother had a good arm. Your mother had a good everything. She straightened up again. Sunday, then, and do not knock and run away like a boy. Knock and stand there. He fried them at 8 in the evening in a pot on a 2-burner stove in an apartment with no curtains. Twice, because it has to be twice. Once at a lower heat to set them, once hot to color them. He put 9 on a plate, covered the plate with foil, carried it up 12 steps and the turn and 8 more, set it down on the landing outside her door, knocked twice, and went back down without waiting. That was all of it. He sat on the mattress afterward with his hands on his knees, and he was aware that he had done a thing to a woman rather than for her, and that a smarter man would not have, and that he would do it again in the morning. She knocked on his door at 1 in the morning. He knew it was her because it was not the knock of somebody who wanted the door opened. It was one flat knuckle, twice, the sound a person makes when they are hoping to be able to say afterward that they tried. She was in the hall in a t-shirt and the same work pants, barefoot, with her hair down. He had not seen her hair down in 9 years, and he made himself look at the floor. "Come up," she said. "You told me." "I know what I told you. Come up. I'm not standing in this hallway at 1 in the morning." The apartment was dark except for the light over the stove. The plate was on the counter with 3 of the 9 gone. Julia's door was shut, and there was a strip of glow under it from a nightlight shaped like a moon. On the burner was the pot. "Sit down," Marisa said. He sat at the end of the table. She turned the flame on under the pot, low, and stood with her back to him and stirred, and for a minute the only sound in the room was the new air conditioner he had put in that week, running quietly, cooling a kitchen for a woman who had not thanked him for it. "This is Sunday's gravy," she said. "It's been up twice. Once Sunday, once tonight. Okay? Twice is what you get. 3 times it turns, and you can taste the metal in it, and nothing fixes that. Sugar will not fix it, and salt will not, and butter will not." She kept stirring. "So this is the 2nd time, Nicolo. I want you to understand what I'm telling you." "I understand what you're telling me." She put a bowl in front of him and sat down at the other end of the table with her hands flat on the wood. There were 4 feet of formica between them, and it might as well have been the visiting room. "She ate 3 of them," Marisa said. "She wanted to know how you knew." "What did you tell her?" "I told her you taught me." Her jaw moved. "I've never lied to her. I told you that on Monday. It's the only thing I've got that I did right, so I don't get to start now because it's uncomfortable." Nico looked at the bowl and did not touch it. "Ask me," he said. "I'm not going to ask you anything. You don't get to be asked. You've had 9 years to say a thing, and every one of those years you had a pen and paper and a mail slot. Then let me say it now." "Say it then." So he said it. "I knew you were pregnant." The refrigerator ticked. Marisa did not move at all. "I knew before I went into Dorrance Street. You told me on the 11th, in this room, standing about where you're sitting. I sat with it for 6 days. On the 17th, I sent your brother home to your mother, and I went and I said the words that put me away, and I knew when I said them what I was leaving in this apartment. He kept his hands where she could see them. I want that said out loud in the room, not because it helps, because you have been the only person carrying it, and it is not yours. She was quiet for a long moment. I know, she said. I know you know. No, Nicolo. I mean, I have known for 9 years. I worked it out in the second week. You think I sat here all that time wondering? Her voice did not rise, and the level of it was the worst thing in the room. I knew you knew, and I knew you went anyway. And I have known it every single day since. And what I have been waiting for is not the information. I had the information. I have been waiting for somebody to say it in front of me so I could stop being the only one who thought it was true. Then I've said it. Yes. 4 years too late to be any use, but you said it. He nodded. He did not defend it. He had spent a long time in a place where men explained themselves constantly, all day, every day, to anyone who would sit still. And he had decided somewhere around year 3 that explanation was the cheapest thing a man could produce. Do you want to know why? He said. I know why. Tommy was 21, and he'd have been dead inside a year, in there or out here. That's half. Then tell me the other half. The other half was her. He looked up. If I go in, she gets born to a woman who cooks and a man who is gone. If I don't go in, she gets born to a man who is on a page in a book, and that follows a kid. It follows them into school, and it follows them to a wedding 40 years later. I sat with it for 6 days, and I decided 9 years was cheap for that. Marisa put both hands over her face. She held them there for 4 or 5 seconds. Then she took them away, and her eyes were dry, and she looked older than she had at the start of the sentence. You decided, she said. Yes. You decided that, by yourself, in 6 days, about my kid. Our kid. Don't. She stood up so fast the chair went back on 2 legs and caught itself. No. You want to say the true thing at 1 in the morning? Fine. Here's mine. I didn't need you to be noble. I needed you to be here. I needed somebody to hold her while I showered. I needed one person in this world to be tired at the same time as me. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she took it back immediately, as she took back everything. And the worst part, Nicolo, the part I have never said to anybody, is that if you had asked me on the 16th, I'd have told you to go. I'd have said the same thing you said. I would have made the same trade. Marisa. So don't sit in my kitchen and be the only one who did something wrong. The clock over the stove said 1:10. Downstairs, a car door shut. Under the door of the next room, the little moon-shaped light went on glowing over a sleeping child who had eaten 3 rice balls and gone to bed happy, knowing nothing about any of this, which was the one thing both of them had managed. Marisa put the chair back under the table with 2 hands. Eat that, she said. Then wash the bowl and put it in the rack and go downstairs and don't come up tomorrow. He ate it. It was very good. And it was the second time up, and neither of them said anything else while he did. He was at the sink with his hands in the water when she spoke from behind him, in an entirely different voice, flat and practical, the voice of a woman running account. A man like that doesn't ask which school, she said. He asks so you'll know he asked. Nico set the bowl in the rack and dried his hands on the towel hanging off the oven door, and he took his time about it. Then he's already made me choose, he said. And there isn't a version of it you're going to want in this house. School started on the Tuesday after Labor Day, and on the Thursday of the first week, the phone at Spurduty's rang at 11:50 in the middle of a 9-ticket run. Ms. Guarino, this is Denise in the office at Kennedy. Julia's fine. She's here with me. There was an incident at recess. Marisa had 4 things on the flat top and a basket in the fryer and a man at the window waiting on a sandwich he had already paid for. Is she hurt? She's not hurt. The other child has a bloody nose. There are certain sentences that arrive with the rest of your day already attached to them. Marisa pulled the basket, killed 2 burners, told Frankie to watch the third, and stood in the back hall with the phone against her shoulder, doing arithmetic she had done 1,000 times. 40 minutes there and back on foot. The nephew's rule about leaving the counter, the $11 an hour she was standing in. "I can be there at 2, she said. "I can't leave before 2. "We can't keep her here until 2, ma'am. She has to be signed out by an authorized adult." And Marisa, standing in the hallway by the mop sink, heard herself say it. "Is there anybody on the card besides me?" "Just you and Annuncia Ferrante, and Mrs. Ferrante's number is disconnected." "Then add somebody." "You can add an emergency contact over the phone with the last 4 of your social. What's the name?" She looked at the wall. "Ferraro," she said. "Nicolo. Ferraro. Relationship to the student?" The friar was ticking behind her. Somebody wanted their sandwich. "Father," Marisa said. It was the first time in 8 years and 11 months that she had said that word to an institution. It went into a computer in an office half a mile away and made a small sound like a key being turned. Then Denise from the office said thank you and asked her to spell the first name again. He walked Julia home at 12:20. Marisa got there at 4. The 2 of them were at the kitchen table with a bag of frozen peas and a notebook. The notebook was open and her daughter was doing multiplication. 63, said Julia. "Good, next one." "Ma," said Julia, seeing her, and put her face down on the notebook, which is what an 8-year-old does instead of crying in front of 2 adults. Nico stood up. "I'll go down." "Sit." He sat. The story came out in pieces over 10 minutes, and it was the oldest story on Federal Hill. A boy named Anthony DeSaro, whose grandfather knew everybody's business and repeated it at the table, had followed Julia across the yard, saying jailbird, jailbird. Then he had said the other thing, the one with her mother in it. Julia had turned around and hit him in the face with a closed fist, because her mother once told her, in a completely different context, that an open hand is an insult and a closed one is an answer. "I'm not sorry," Julia said into the notebook. "You have to say you're sorry." "I'll say it. I'm not going to be it." Nico made a sound. Marisa looked at him sharply. He put his hand over his mouth and looked at the table, but his shoulders were going. Then she had to turn around and face the stove for a second, and when she turned back, her own mouth had gotten away from her. "Both of you are terrible," Julia said, muffled. Nuncia Ferrante came down at 6 with a colander of tomatoes she had grown in a bucket, because that is what she did instead of knocking, and she stayed for supper, and it turned into the sort of evening that Marisa did not have anymore and had not known she was missing. Somewhere between the tomatoes and the bread, Julia put her fork down and asked the question she had obviously been saving for a table with 4 people at it. "Nico, in there, were you allowed to have a cat?" Marisa opened her mouth and did not get anything out of it in time. "No," Nico said. "Nobody had one?" "There was a cat in the yard for a while. It wasn't anybody's." "Did it have a name?" "Some guys called it Sergeant." "Did you call it Sergeant?" "I didn't call it anything." He put his fork down as well, so that he was answering her properly. "If you name a thing in there, you have to watch what happens to it." He said it flat, the way a man gives directions to a bus stop, and then he went back to his plate. Julia nodded and accepted the whole of it at once, because children take the truth much faster than adults do, and it was Marisa who had to look at the ceiling for a second. Nuncia watched Nico over the rim of her glass and said nothing at all, which from Nuncia Ferrante was an entire speech. Then Nuncia told the story about her husband and the pig. Everyone on the hill had heard the story about her husband and the pig. Rocco Ferrante had gone to a wedding in Johnston in 1974 and come home in a borrowed truck with a live pig in it, and had done 6 months at the ACI for it, and the pig in the story had gotten larger every year for 50 years, until it was now, by Nuncia's own account, roughly the size of a Buick. 6 months, Nuncia said, for a pig. "It was a big pig," said Nico. "It was an enormous pig." She pointed her fork at him. You did 9 years, and for what? You didn't even get a pig." There was 1 second of absolute silence in that kitchen. Then Nico laughed. It came out of him rusty and too loud, like something starting after a long winter. Julia shrieked with delight because the grown-ups had broken. Nuncia sat there enormously pleased with herself. Marisa laughed until she had to put her hand flat on the table. 9 years ago, in this same kitchen, the 4 chairs had been full on a Sunday. Her mother, Tommy, Nico, and her. Her mother used to say that you could tell everything about a man by whether he got up to clear the plates. And Nico always got up, and Tommy never did. And their mother had said that Tommy would learn. She had died in 2019, still believing that people learn. Tommy came at 9 o'clock, after Nuncia had gone up and Julia had gone to bed. Marisa had not seen her brother since Easter. He had a Cranston haircut now and a car he was making payments on, and he stood in the middle of her kitchen with his keys in his hand because he had decided in advance that he was not staying. Nico downstairs? He's downstairs. I already talked to him. Tommy would not sit. Riss, I'm going to say something and you're going to be mad. Then don't say it. Ettore came to see me. Marisa put down the towel. He came to the shop Tuesday. He was nice. He's always nice. Tommy turned the keys over in his hand. Once, twice. Riss, I owe him. And it isn't for something bad. When Danielle was born, we were 16 grand under on the car, the rent, everything. He covered it. He never said a word about it, not one word in 4 years. How much? That's not... How much, Tommy? It's not about how much. It's about that he's asking now. Her brother looked at the floor. He wants me to tell Nico to take the chair back. That's all. He doesn't have to do anything. Just sit in a room once a month and let them write his name down and everything goes quiet. The kid goes to school. Nobody says anything to anybody. Everybody's square. You came here to tell him to go back in. I came here because if he doesn't, they've got nothing to close out. And when they've got nothing to close out, they start looking at what else he's got. Tommy's voice went up and cracked. And for a second, he was 21 again in her mother's kitchen. He's got you. He's got her. That's what he's got, Riss. That's the entire list. Marisa stood very still by the sink. 9 years ago, she said, that man went into a building for you. I know what he did. You were 21. He was 28 and he went in for you. My daughter has never had a birthday with him at it, and you are standing in my kitchen at 9 o'clock at night asking him to go back. I'm asking him to sit in a room. Get out. He went. He went as he always went, quickly, already explaining himself to somebody who was no longer listening, and on the landing below he stopped at the brown door again, and through the floor she heard every word of it. He's not asking you to do anything, Nico. He's asking me. He already knows what you'll say. A pause, and her brother's voice went small and reasonable, the voice he used when he had already decided. He told me to come here so you'd know he knows. That's the whole message. I'm just the guy who carries it. Nothing came back through the door. Tommy stood there a while getting nothing, and then she heard the street door. She stood in the kitchen for a while with the water running over nothing. Then she went to the window and looked down at the street. Nico was out there under the light with his hands in his pockets, not moving, looking at the corner where the bus turns. She understood 2 things at the same time and did not like either of them. The first was that he was already deciding. The second was that the decision would look, from the outside, exactly like a man doing the right thing. The suit was in a garment bag in the back of the closet in the downstairs apartment, which is where Nuncia had put it in 2017 when she cleared out his mother's place, and where it had hung for 8 years because nobody wanted to be the one who threw it away. Charcoal, 2-button, made by a man on Dean Street who was dead now. He had bought it at 27 with the first money he ever made that he could not explain to anybody. He put it on at 10 on Saturday morning in a room with no mirror, so he had to find out about it as a man finds out anything in a room with no mirror, which is by moving. The trousers went on. The shirt collar would not close by half an inch, and he left the top button open and put the tie under it anyway. The jacket he got onto one shoulder and then had to work the other arm in behind him, and when he brought his arms forward, the shoulders pulled hard across the back, and the sleeves stopped an inch above where they were supposed to stop. 9 years of a concrete yard and a steel bar, and nothing else to do with an afternoon. The man who bought this suit did not exist anymore. What was standing in the suit now was somebody wider. He could get it buttoned. It looked, from the front, like a suit. Ettore kept his office in the back of the dry cleaner on Manton, past the racks, in a room with a desk and 2 chairs and a calendar from a plumbing supply. He stood up when Nico came in and shook his hand with both of his and held it a second longer than a handshake needs, which, from Ettore Mancuso, was practically an embrace. "Nicolo, sit down. You want coffee?" "No." "Sit anyway." Nico sat. The chair was too small for him, and Ettore watched him find that out and did not smile. "I want to tell you something first," Ettore said, "because I have thought about it for 9 years, and I would like to have said it. What you did was the right thing. Everybody knows it. There is not a man in this city who would say otherwise." "Then we're done." "We are not done, and you know we are not done, or you would not have put on a suit that does not fit you." He took a ledger out of the desk drawer, not a computer, but a ledger, green cloth on the boards, the kind an accountant used in 1962, and he opened it flat with the ease of a man who opens it every week and turned it around so that it faced Nico. The left-hand page was a column of names. His own was 14 lines down, in blue ink, in handwriting he did not recognize, and beside it were 9 years of monthly entries running down the page and on to the next one, and the next one after that. "You were never crossed out," Ettore said. Nico did not touch the book. 9 years and 1 month, said Ettore. "Every month there is a number by your name, because that is what the book does, and every month somebody signs that the number was handled. Look at the signature. E.M. over and over, 109 times. I want to be clear because you are a proud man, and this is the part where a proud man stops listening." Ettore folded his hands. "I did not put your name in that book. Your name was in that book before I could write. But I have carried the line for 9 years, and I have carried it out of my own pocket in 11 of those months. And I did it because it was owed and because nobody else would. I never asked for it. No, you went away and you asked for nothing, and that is exactly the problem, Nicolo, because a man who asks for nothing cannot be paid, and a debt that cannot be paid does not go away. It sits. It has been sitting for 9 years, and it is sitting now in the same building as your daughter." The fan in the corner turned one way and then the other. Nico looked at the page. Small numbers in a column, tidy, initialed, a whole decade of his life kept alive in blue ink by a man he had spoken to 4 times. And he understood, sitting in a chair that was too small for him, in a room behind a dry cleaner, that the thing he had bought had never been for sale. He had gone in for 6 days of arithmetic and a single conclusion, that a child born to a man on a page inherits the page. So he had taken himself off the street to take himself off the page, and he had been very careful and very quiet about it, and he had spent 9 years being sure that at least the arithmetic was sound. It had never been sound. His name had stayed on the page the entire time. It had stayed on the page while she was born, while she learned to walk, while she started school. Whatever he thought he was buying, he had bought nothing. He had simply not been there. "Say the rest of it," he said. "You come back to the room, once a month. You sit, they read the book, your line gets closed properly, and everybody watches it get closed." Ettore turned the ledger back around. "You will not be asked to do a single thing. I will personally make sure of it. You will be a man with a chair and a name and nothing to do, which is more than most men get. And if I don't, then the line stays open, and an open line is an invitation. It would not come from me. I have no interest in that building." He said it patiently, as though explaining a bus schedule. But there are 4 or 5 people in this city who read that book like a sports page. Every one of them can see that there is a Ferraro line still running, and that the Ferraro in question has exactly 2 things in the world. Both of them are on the 2nd floor of a house on Atwell's with a bad lock. You went and looked at the lock. I looked at the building. I look at all the buildings. Ettore stood up and put the ledger away, which was a kindness, because it meant Nico did not have to keep seeing it. "Take a week. You are a serious man, and this is a serious thing. And Nicolo, before you go, I will say one more thing that I do not have to say." "Say it." "That girl has your hands." It is not a small thing to look at somebody's hands and see somebody else's. Nico walked home the long way, up Manton and along the top of the hill, in a suit that did not fit, in the heat, and by the time he came down Atwell's, his shirt was soaked through at the back, and he had made no decision at all. He knew it from the corner. There was a canvas bag on the front step with the top folded down. Beside it, squared up, were his 3 books, a coffee can, his shaving kit. Everything had been packed by somebody who was angry and was still not going to let his things get rained on. The brown door on the first landing had a new lock, brass, shining, the tape still on it, fitted in the last 4 hours by a locksmith who charged double on a Saturday. He stood on the sidewalk and looked at it for a while. Then he heard the window go up above him. He kept his eyes on the new brass lock with the tape still on it, because he was still in the suit, and there was no explaining the suit. "I called the school," Marisa said from the 2nd floor. "I took you off the card." "Okay." "Denise asked me why. I said I made a mistake." "Okay." "Don't say okay to me, Nicolo. I want you to look up here and tell me you didn't go and see that man in your good clothes." He looked up. Nuncia's television was going on the 3rd floor. Down the block, somebody was shouting at a dog in Portuguese. On the 2nd floor, Marisa Guarino stood in the window of the kitchen he had cooled with his own 2 hands, and the light behind her was the light over the stove. "I went and saw him," he said. She nodded slowly, once, and there was nothing in her face at all, which was worse than anything that could have been in it. 9 years I did this by myself," she said. 9 years. And the one thing I never had to be afraid of was that you'd walk back into it. That was the only thing I had. You want to know the truth? The whole time you were in there, I could tell her the truth, and it was a good truth. Her father made a bad decision one time, and he is paying for it, and he does not do that anymore." Her voice was perfectly level. "What do I tell her now?" "I haven't agreed to anything." "You put on the suit." "Marisa." "You put on the suit, Nico." The window came down 4 inches and stopped. "Your rent's paid through the 30th. I'm not a thief. There's a rooming house on Ridge that takes people on paper. Ask Nuncia, she knows the woman." The window shut. He stood there until the streetlight came on, which at the end of the first week of September in Providence is around 7:15. Then he picked up the canvas bag and the 3 books and the coffee can. He sat down on the step of a building he no longer had a key to, in a suit that did not fit, and worked out that there was exactly 1 move left on the board, and that it was going to cost him the only name he had. Above him, in a kitchen window on the 2nd floor, a small shape climbed up onto the sink to see where he had gone, and was pulled down. He slept a week at the rooming house on Ridge Street, and every one of those nights Marisa lay in her own bed, listening to a floor that had nothing under it. That was the part nobody warns you about. She had spent 9 years in an apartment with an empty 1st floor and had never once noticed it, and now she noticed it constantly, and the noticing was worse than anything he had done to her. On Wednesday, Julia asked where he was. On Thursday, Julia did not ask. She did not ask again after that. On Friday, Marisa Guarino did the arithmetic she had been avoiding all week. If he sat in that room once a month, he would be a man in a book, and her daughter would be a man in a book's daughter, and Marisa would spend the next 10 years explaining a thing she did not believe. If he did not sit in that room, the line stayed open, and an open line is an address. Both roads had her kitchen at the end of them. Both of them. There was no third road on the board, so she went and made one, because that was what she did all day long for $6 a plate. She looked at what was on the shelf and worked out what could come out of it. She called Ettore Mancuso at the dry cleaner on Manton and told him that if he wanted to close a 9-year line, he could come to the back room at Sperduties on Saturday at 3 after service, and she would give him a coffee. Then she walked to Ridge Street and stood on the sidewalk until Nico came out. Saturday, 3 o'clock, the back room at work. Marisa, I'm not asking you what you decided. I don't want to know what you decided. She had her hands in her apron pockets, and she kept them there. I want it said in a room I'm standing in. 9 years ago, somebody made a decision about my life in 6 days without me, and I've had a long time to think about what I'd want if it ever came up again. That's what I'd want. That's all of it. The back room at Sperduties held a table, 4 chairs, a case of canned tomatoes, and a calendar from 2019 that nobody had taken down. Ettore came at 3 exactly, in a summer jacket, and he took his hat off when he saw her, and he sat where she put him. Nico came at 3 and stood until she pointed at a chair. Marisa poured 3 coffees and sat down at the end of the table with her back to the tomatoes. Go ahead, she said. Nico put his hands flat on the table. I'm not taking the chair, he said. Ettore said nothing at all. He waited, because he was a man who had learned early that the second half of a sentence is always the part that costs something. I'm not taking it, and I'm not leaving the line open, so I'm asking for the third thing. Nico's voice did not change. Close the line the way you close it for a dead man. The room was very quiet. Marisa heard the walk-in cycle on and shudder. Say that again, Ettore said. You have a book. A line closes 3 ways. Somebody pays it, somebody inherits it, or the name dies. Nico turned his coffee a quarter turn, which was a thing he had picked up from the man across the table and probably did not know he had done. So put a date next to my name and rule it off. Nicolo Ferraro is finished as of today. No chair, no line, no protection. Nobody has to nod at me on this street ever again. I'll take my mother's name at the courthouse on Monday, and I'll go on a crew with Manny Pyers laying block. And if any of your 4 or 5 people ever come to that building on Atwell's, there is nothing there to be worth their trouble, because there is no Ferraro in it. You understand what you are giving up. I understand exactly what I'm giving up. I'm giving up the only reason anybody in this city has ever been polite to me. And if somebody puts a hand on you at a bus stop, nobody will come. Nobody has come for 9 years. Ettore sat back. He looked at the 2019 calendar for a while. Marisa watched him do the arithmetic and watched him arrive. She understood at the exact moment he did that he was going to say yes, and why. He had come to close a line, and the chair was the only way of closing it that a man in his position was allowed to offer out loud. Nicolo had just handed him a better one. A dead line meant a chair that was permanently, legitimately, publicly his, held by a man nobody had ever seen reach for it, and no man on the hill could ever say afterward that Ettore Mancuso had taken a thing from Nicolo Ferraro. He was getting everything. That was fine. She had never needed him to lose. It is a hard thing to do to a family name, Ettore said. It's a hard thing to do to a kid, said Nico. One of them has to take it. Ettore turned to Marisa, because he was a formal man and she was the one whose room it was. You have nothing to say to this? I have one thing. She had thought about how to say it for 2 days, and in the end, she said it plainly. You'll rule it off in front of me, here in this room, not next week and not back at Manton. And Nico, when he does it, you don't say thank you. Nobody at this table says thank you to anybody. This is a receipt, not a favor. For the first time since she had known him, Ettore Mancuso looked genuinely amused. Your mother was the same, he said. He took the green ledger out of a leather folder and found the page. He ruled a line through the entry with a steel pen, wrote the date beside it, and turned it around so both of them could see. Then he closed the book and drank half his coffee out of politeness and put on his hat. At the door, he stopped. "Mrs. Ferrante's tomatoes," he said, "are a disgrace. Tell her I said so." And he was gone, and it was over, and it had taken 11 minutes. Marisa sat in the back room by herself for a while afterward with 3 cups on the table. 9 years ago, in the kitchen upstairs, on a night in February, a man had stood behind her with his hands over her hands and taught her how to close cold rice around a spoonful of ragu. "You do not press it," he had said. "You hold it and let it decide." She had made them wrong 4 times and thrown all 4 in the pan anyway, and they had come apart in the oil, and the 2 of them had eaten the wreckage out of the pan with their fingers, standing up at 11 at night. She had been 24 years old, and she had believed absolutely that nothing in her life was ever going to be difficult. She locked up at 4 and walked home in the last real heat of the year. He was on the step with the canvas bag. Julia was already out there with him, sitting 1 step down, and she had a hairbrush. "Ma, he's doing it wrong." "I'm not doing it wrong." "You have to do 3. "I am doing 3. Marisa stopped at the bottom of the steps and stood there with her keys in her hand. Her daughter was between his knees on the concrete stoop of a 100-year-old building on Atwells Avenue, and Nicolo was working a section of that child's hair into a braid with 2 hands that were twice the size they needed to be for it. The ink went from his knuckles up under his rolled sleeves. He was going slowly. He had the ends of the sections pinched between fingers that could not feel very much anymore, and he was concentrating like a man diffusing something. "Where'd you learn that?" Marisa said. "Guy inside. He had 4 girls." He did not look up. "He drew them on paper. Took me 2 years to get it." 2 years. There wasn't a rush. Julia sat perfectly still, which she never did for anybody, including her mother. He finished it. It was not a good braid. It was tight in the wrong places, and there was a piece hanging out at the back. Julia put her hand up, felt it all over, declared it acceptable, and ran off down the sidewalk to show it to a girl from the 3rd floor of the next house. Nico stayed sitting on the step. "I go to the courthouse Monday," he said. "It's $40. I've got $40. "I know. After that, I'm nobody. I want you to hear it out loud from me while you can still change your mind about the room downstairs." He looked at his hands. "I'm not asking to come up. I've been very clear with myself about that." Marisa went past him, up the steps, and unlocked the front door. She left it open. He came up 12 steps and the turn and 8 more, and stopped on the landing, because that was where he had agreed to stop, and she had to say it. "In the kitchen, Nicolo." The pot was on the back burner. She had put it on at 5 that morning, as she did every day of her life. It had been going low all day, and it had not been up again since. "Second time," she said, "not the 3rd. Stir it." He looked at her. "Stir it," she said. "My feet have been on a floor since 5 o'clock." So he stood at her stove with a wooden spoon in his hand, in a t-shirt, with his back to the room, and he stirred, and she pulled out a chair at her own kitchen table and sat down in it. This was the whole thing, and there was no other part to it. She put 2 plates on the table. Then she got up and got a 3rd one down out of the cabinet, because the girl would be in at 6 and she would be hungry. Up on top of the refrigerator, there was a Danish butter cookie tin with 9 years of unopened envelopes in it, and nobody in this story ever explained it to anybody. Outside on Atwells, a bus took the corner. The bells at St. Anne went for 6. "Nico!" her daughter yelled from the sidewalk. "Are we eating?" He said they were.